for the feral splendor that remains, for Kazam Ali. Sometimes I strain to hear one natural sound. When gender blurs in a poem, my world sets a tooth in the gear. If God is in me, when will I ask for my needs to be met? Every God is qualified. It is not such a secret. When I was afraid of the road, I learned to drive. Map says the name of your city and ocean, line drawn to it, towing behind the big party. History of life on Earth might be interesting to a visitor one day. Chewing parsley and cilantro together is, for me, where forest meets meadow. In a future life, would we like to fall in love with the world as it is, with no recollection of the beauty we destroyed today? I began writing poetry in 1975 while growing up in a small working class town in rural America. Most of my family worked in factories. When I was a teenager, I moved to Philadelphia to be a poet and to live my life openly as a queer person without the constant threat of violence. This was the mid-1980s, and I lost more than half of everyone I loved to AIDS. I learned something very important during that time period about creativity while surrounded by death and dying. It was not my depression that made me want to write, but the focus of the depression. Once I realized sadness was not behind the will to create, but the overwhelming focus these periods of emotion brought, I felt liberated. Suddenly, I could see how giving myself new structures to focus changed my writing. My angry anti-government poems became as important to me as eulogizing dead friends and writing love poems for my new boyfriend. And for years, I felt that I was living my life the way I wanted as a writer in the city. In 2005, I realized a learned behavior from my childhood controlled my writing and life. This was a crisis. My family work in factories where they become extensions of machinery for most of their waking hours. To cope, they shut the present off, sending their minds into the past and future. The danger is not being able to switch it back after going home. When I speak with them, I can hear that they are depressed about the past or anxious about the future, with no sense of the present. Finally realizing that I had learned this coping mechanism as a child, I needed a solution for a different relationship with time. I created somatic poetry rituals, which are so odd and focused that they anchor me in the present with what I refer to as an extreme present. I had found behind a dumpster in a beauty academy where I was living at the time in Philadelphia, a red wig that was very long. I took it home and I brushed all the crust out of it. And I decided that if I was going to do these rituals and I was going to be in public, that I needed to have a conversation with the world around me that was new in order to put myself deep into the present to be able to write the way I wanted to. The fact of the matter is, research has shown that as much as 80% or higher of human communication interaction is nonverbal. Now think about this wig, this red wig. Half of it was permed, like fly out perm, just, and the other half was straightened. So it was a very strange looking wig. And when I would wear it out on the city streets, and every time I would come across somebody, there would be a reaction each time. And that communication, that interaction became part of the poem. I realized two very important things at the end of that first day with the red poem. One is that I was in the present the entire time, which was very exciting. But the second thing is that there is no other time in my life where I would have written that poem for any other reason. It was very exciting because I realized at that point that I could change my focus and orchestrate the world around me to show the creative viability of the world for my poems. Since that first set of poems by eating colors and wearing the colors, I have done many different rituals, somatic poetry rituals, from studying full seasonal life of a tree in a shopping mall parking lot, to pollinating flowers with my tongue for security cameras. And also I did a ritual, a somatic poetry ritual, where I was reading tarot cards in grocery stores to packaged meat. I enjoyed that one very much. Even though I was thrown out of the grocery store, it was still a lot of fun. I got a few tarot cards in there before I was asked to leave. And I have occasionally written or created rituals to write inside the rituals for particular occasions. For instance, back in 1984, I created the genderless name CAConrad. Now, that wasn't very welcome in 1984. It's a very different story now in 2020, to my relief. But the fact of the matter is, I wanted to celebrate the anniversary of this decision when the 30th anniversary arose. Let me share that ritual with you and the resulting poem. I call the somatic poetry ritual MIA Escalator. And it's dedicated to Jen Benka and Carol Mirakov. I rode several of my favorite escalators in Philadelphia, taking notes up and down the vintages. At the top and bottom of the ride, I would show photographs of myself to strangers and ask, "Excuse me, have you seen this poem?" Sometimes there was confusion. "Isn't that you?" I would reply, "No. Many people think I look like her, but have you seen her?" I feel very fortunate to have been born before the ultrasound machine. My generation was the last generation to have a male and female name waiting at the other end of the birth canal. My generation is the last to have our mothers touch their bellies, talking to us as male and female, pink or blue, both pink and blue. Have you seen this person? I enjoyed my conversations with strangers and made at least one new friend, a handsome man who knew I was the person in the photograph. That person, I am that person, and agreed. The ultrasound machine gives the parents the ability to talk to the unborn child by their gender, taking the intersex 9-month conversation away from the child. The opportunities limit us in a new world. Encourage parents to not know. Encourage parents to allow anticipation on either end. Escalators are a nice ride, slowly rising and falling, writing while writing, notes for the poem, meeting new people at either end. Excuse me, my escalator notes became a poem. The goal of keeping myself anchored was very important, of course, as I said. But I believed that these somatic poetry rituals could do other things for me. Years ago, I had a boyfriend who changed his name to Earth. Earth was one of the main political organizers for the AIDS activist group ACT UP in Philadelphia. If for the years after his death, and especially after dealing with the brutality of the police, who started calling me faggot when I would insist that they try to find the killers of my boyfriend, I realized that I had to, I just created a movie in my head about the injustice that I was living with, where the police were human beings and they captured the killers. There's a courtroom drama. I knew that this ritual was working the day that that movie in my head disappeared, and it has never returned since. I was sitting on the forest floor, and I had this epiphany that my boyfriend had changed his name to Earth at a time when human beings were destroying the planet. And it occurred to me the first time that the way he was treated by his rapists and killers and then burned alive was exactly what was going on to the planet. And this realization just was an overwhelming wave of grief. And I laid backwards and I just looked up at the sky with my body on the leaves in the ground beneath me. And as soon as I did that, and as soon as I calmed my breathing, I tuned into the world around me in a new way. The dirt beneath me, the insects around me, the birds, the squirrels, the wind, the leaves on the trees. And that's when I had the idea for this next ritual. This new ritual that I've been working on is called Resurrect Extinct Vibration. One of my goals with Resurrect was to focus on ecopoetics beyond our degraded soil, air, and water, and to consider the concept of vibrational absence. The World Wildlife Association's biennial report revealed the most harrowing fact that more than 70% of our planet's wild creatures have disappeared in the past 4 decades. When a species becomes extinct, they take their sounds with them: breath, footfall, heartbeat, wing flutter, cry, and song. In turn, we replace their sounds with our human din of metal, machines, bombs, drones, and cars. There are ornithologists right now who claim that one of the reasons in the United States for decreasing bird population, keep in mind much of it is pollution and other things, but part of it is also that human beings are so loud, our cars, our everything, that they can't hear one another. The bird songs are for, I mean, it's funny when you look at these writings of early scientists, when they would talk about birds, they would say, oh, well, they were pleasant, but kind of meaningless, which is so ridiculous that they would think that. Of course, these songs are important. These birds speak to one another. They need to find one another to mate and have offspring. And some seasons they can't find one another and they don't have young. The altered pattern of our planet's assembled resonance is my focus. When I was born over half a century ago, my infant cells proliferated on a significantly higher wild organic vibration than the cells of children born today. Resurrect somatic poetry ritual momentarily returns the music of the disappeared back to the air, the body, and the land. There were 9 different ingredients to this ritual. I'm going to tell you just about a few of them. One of them involved lying on the ground across the United States when I would be driving to teach and perform. And then I would have little speakers down, it started down by my feet, and I would play these field recordings of these recently extinct and highly endangered species. And I would flood my body with these vibrations. And then I would write.
CA, how do you find the shapes of your poems?
Okay, well, thank you for asking that question. My poems were pretty much on the left margin. But in 2005, when I began doing these rituals, I would literally, and I mean this when I say this, I would feel ill. And then I started pushing the words into the interior of the page, and then I would feel better. My feeling is that these spirits around me that helped me write the poems were, in fact, they came to me in a voice one morning before waking up, and they said, listen, you're going to mean this when I said this, I would feel ill. And then I started pushing the words into the interior of the page, and then I would feel better. My feeling is that these spirits around me that helped me write the poems In fact, they came to me in a voice one morning before waking up, and they said, listen, your human world has too many straight lines. We're trying to show you the violence, the way out of the violence of the line. And here we are stuck inside from this virus, and we're surrounded by these lines. So the poems, they shape themselves. And once I understood that, I just surrendered to it, letting them be shaped. But I don't really have a goal of how they're going to look until the very, very end. I don't even